Well, today we're going to be wrapping up the book of Colossians, so if you guys want to start turning to Colossians chapter 4. So one of the fun things about going through the book of Colossians like I have been, and how Mark's called me up every just couple of weeks or couple of months, I just have to keep going back to where I left off, and it's kind of refreshing to get to start over with a book and have to study through it up to the point that I am. And this is kind of a continuous reminder of going through this. And I really love how Colossians has an emphasis on the theme of Jesus being our source of knowledge and wisdom, and how he's verifying for us that that's the only worthwhile thing to pursue. And encouragement for the believer, encouragement for those that have already found him, that if you're doing this, you're doing well. And also assurance for those that might be seeking to know that you are seeking something worth pursuing. That if you really want something genuine, this is something genuine to find. Chapter 1, verse 15 has one of my favorite passages in the New Testament where it talks about he is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation, and how he's above all things. In him all things consist. All things were created for and by him. And I just love the ownership that's given to God and given to Jesus there over creation and over his plan. And I love in verse 19 and 20, where it says, "For it pleased the Father that in him all the fullness should dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself by him, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross." It just as it continues to that ownership, and the fact that it's not only the fact that it belongs to God, but the fact that it pleases him to be the one to do those things for us. He didn't want to come up with a different means to restore fellowship. He didn't want to come up with a different means to unite him and man. He wanted to be the one to do it himself. And that's how much he values us, and that's how precious man is to God. As it goes through, it talks a little bit about warning. It talks a little bit about things that you don't want to get caught up in. It talks about the importance of being knit together and being strong as a body of believers. The dangers of people that can try to lead you astray with persuasive words, and how important it is to remain rooted and built up and firm in Christ, and how important it is for him to be our stronghold and our refuge. It goes into a little bit talking about the circumcision of the Spirit that's taken place, the removement of the body of sins from our lives, just completely gone, not even a factor in our lives anymore. And verses 14 and 15 talk about how he had wiped out the handwriting of requirements, which was contrary to us. He taken it out of the way and nailed it to the cross. And he has disarmed the principalities and powers, and he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. How man was in a state of having a perfect counter. We were in a state where there was something that we couldn't face on our own, and how it's something that had us oppressed, had us defeated. And Jesus not only obtained a victory for us, but he obtained a heroic victory on our behalf and gave that over to us to be able to come to him, to be able to approach him. And how he's offering an adoption. He's the king over the new kingdom, and the gates are open, and he's openly saying, if you want to be a citizen of my nation, come and join me. And this includes that adoption. And anything of your past life is gone. From the moment you join him, from the moment you walk into his kingdom, you are a new creation. You are renewed. And there's nothing that can follow you in. And everything that was mocking us, everything that was standing against us has not only been defeated, but it was mocked in return. It was made a spectacle against us. That you have so little power over them now that you can't even boast that you had any influence on them before. We get a short little piece in chapter 3 talking about some instructions. If we are Christians now, these are some things that we ought to be about doing. And for me, I see a flow that goes through this book, that if you are following the first few chapters, if you're already pursuing Christ, if he's already your source of wisdom, you're already your source of knowledge, then we can get some assumptions that there's only a few things you need to be doing. And this admonishment that we have for each other And each member of a household only gets one verse. And then you get the bondservants, so we get a little paragraph. And I think it's encouraging because it's like, in our day and age, that's probably where most of our lives are spent. Most of our struggles are in the workplace. And that's also where most of our testimony to others would be. Chapter 4, verse 1 just wraps it up with the masters. Don't forget that even though if you're at the top, you still have a master in heaven watching over you. But getting into verse 2 of chapter 4, where we're going to start wrapping this up, it went from a point where it went from, what are you following? What are you doing? To now, here's some instructions for things that we ought to be doing specifically. And I think this contains probably one of the most relevant verses for our day and age today, and one of the most sincere requests for the church to be doing today that we should be paying attention to. So it says, continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in chains. He's asking us to continue earnestly in prayer. Earnest means with a sincere or intense conviction. Seriously, resolutely, eagerly, and fervently, zealously pursuing these things. And I think that the prayer life of many Christians is under fire because I think it's an easy thing to forget. I think it's easy for us to forget how important it is to approach God with our prayers and how important it is for us to lay things down at His feet and to seek Him in that manner. And there's a little bit of a challenge for me too, is how sincere and how intense am I seeking God in this field? How resolutely and how eagerly do I approach this? And being vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Vigilant means keeping careful watch, observant and attentive, alert, on guard, mindful, to be prepared and to be awake. There's already a couple verses that come into mind when it talks about the idea of being awake. And we're also the generation that's looking forward to Christ's coming. And if you've ever been challenged, is Christ going to find you asleep? Is He going to find you slumbering? Or is He going to find you awake and active? And when I was looking these words up in the dictionary, I thought it was fun how some of them just have these short little descriptions, but vigilant had just so many different meanings to it, so many different things that can fill it. But where it says to be vigilant in thanksgiving, so when you wonder about why is Thanksgiving important, I've heard a lot of chatter and I've heard a lot of pondering from people wondering where God's moving or people that have doubted God's plan, and they say, well, I just don't see Him doing anything. And I've also heard some that say, I don't know if I can believe in a God that would allow all these things to happen. And are we giving Him credit due for the things that He's actually doing? And I think that's where the importance of Thanksgiving comes from. Because when you're giving credit to God for the things that He's doing in your lives, you become encouraged because you start to see His hand in your life. And some people might not want to or might not be willing to give God the credit that He deserves, thinking, well, I'm a little more self-made, I have this ability. But in that, you could also forget that God has given you the ability to do the things that you need to do. Not only in a personal perspective, but in a perspective of the church body. How do we see the church body moving? What's the body of Christ doing today? How is it reaching out? How many people are being drawn into Christ? I remember hearing the discussion on the idea of miracles. How many people want to see God perform a miracle, and how the statement where no miracle ever brought anybody to Christ. That's not what saves you. That's not what salvation is. That was given to us as an assurance of who Jesus was. But at the same time, are you actually even paying attention? Because if you really do observe how God's worked and the things that God has done, there have been some amazing events through history of how God has worked in the lives of the church. I remember hearing stories of missionaries going to foreign places and just the things that they had to go through, and just how you would see God lining things out for them as they approached, and just how much faith it took for them to move forward and giving praise to God in those circumstances. Romans chapter 2 talks about, not Romans chapter 2, sorry, I'm thinking verse 2. So Romans chapter 12, verse 11 says, "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord." One of the meanings of the word earnest is also zealously. So to have zeal is to have energy or enthusiasm, and to be in pursuit of a cause or an objective with committedness. And my personal conviction here, am I ever sleepy with the things of God? Or how much energy or how much enthusiasm do I approach him with? And I think one of the reasons I keep asking myself is because I don't want to seem like I'm pointing the finger at anybody. And I don't want to condemn anybody. But if you're feeling convicted, understand that that's between you and the Lord. But I think it's important to always be willing to self-examine in these things. Personally, I don't think I would ever be as enthusiastic as I should be. I don't know if I would ever be as zealous as I should be. I always feel like there's a step further that I should be going. And I don't say that in the sense of setting up an impossible goal for myself, but I'm also saying in the sense that I don't want to feel like I've ever drawn a line, to feel like I've met a standard that I want to be striving for God, because I sincerely want to serve him out of a sincere love and interest for him and for the things that he would want me to be about doing. Verse 3, where it says, "Praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the world to speak the mystery of Christ." As I look around, as I see little blurbs from the news and I hear testimonies from people that are struggling in life, I don't think there's any more sincere request than that. And I don't think there's any more sincere thing that we ought to be praying for in the world today. How desperately do people need to know what the mystery of Christ is? In Matthew chapter 13, verse 11, Jesus talking to his disciples, he says how he answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God and of heaven, but to them it has not been given." And it's talking about this idea that to give knowledge to those that aren't going to use it, it's almost a waste, or it's almost even cruel to give people the knowledge when they won't use it. But if your heart's not for God, if you're not willing to bend, if you're not willing to listen to and attend to what it is he would offer you, then you're not going to understand these things. I've heard some people kind of mockingly say before how they've read the Bible, but that didn't make any sense to them, or they didn't find the answers they were looking for. And I told them, I don't think that you've been reading it with a heart that's sincerely searching. I think you read it more in a sense of trying to prove your point or agenda, but you didn't approach it with a willingness to learn or a willingness to be taught. And that's one of the first steps, is we need to realize our perspective of where we are in relation to God. I see many people blocked off. And I see many people that are unwilling to hear. And where we get to the verse, where it says, "For which I am also in chains." So we have Paul here, and he's just kind of reminding us that he's in chains. And I don't take this so much as an idea that he's kind of pressing his current situation. But this also makes me think about how many people are being actively restrained from being able to minister. How many roadblocks are actually being placed in front of our ministers and our preachers and our teachers to spread what they should be doing. Like it says in verse 4, "That I may make it manifest as I ought to speak." Paul understands that as a minister, as someone that's chosen by God, this is something that he ought to be doing. This isn't something that's just a simple instruction from God or something that's just a suggestion. This is something that he ought to be doing. This is something that he's taken on and that he's called to be doing. And for us as the church, we need to be looking for these opportunities to pray for and support our ministers to be able to do the things that they ought to be doing. With a limited amount of time left, because we are in the end times of the world. And even though it seems like God's tarrying, he's on his way back. There were some times in my life where I think, wouldn't say that I was discouraged, but I would forget or not be mindful to how much I should be praying and how much I should be seeking on these things. But I've also seen a lot of ministers struggling that need the support that the church can give them. And the support and the building up shouldn't only ever be one way from your leaders to the people, but from the people to the leaders, to be able to give them the strength to move forward. I was thinking about how Paul found Timothy and how encouraging it was for him to have an assistant, a helper that was eager to serve and eager to move, and just how it just helped revitalize him as he went, to see that enthusiasm and see that energy and how important it was for him. And I think about today how easy it is to think, like, you have a children's minister, but are they being ministered to? They're serving. And if that's where God has called them to be, they're going to be blessed in that place. But are you remembering to to seek on their behalf? Are you remembering to build them up and lift them up? I also think that some ministries, like worship ministry, for example, I think is extremely oppressed because there are things where you're approaching to lead a congregation. You have to think not only what it is that you're bringing, but also where's your heart as you come into this place. It's not as simple as it is for some just showing up and worshiping because they get to enjoy the service that was brought to them. Excuse me for a second. But I also think about how many different times Paul was hindered and the different types of experiences he had. And as you read through the book of Acts, and you would get this ministry team would go to one area, and they would have people like following them around and making a scene, and they would have to rebuke them and drive them away. And these actual spiritual attacks that were happening. I was talking with someone yesterday about people being caught up in philosophy and caught up in debate, and how that's an easy loop to get stuck in, where you find yourself trapped in a mindset of trying to outwit or outsmart someone rather than just presenting straight truth. And how there's almost pressure on them to be able to do that today as well. But where it gets into verse 5, he starts kind of exhorting us at the same time. Because as the believer, where he says, walk in wisdom towards those who are outside, redeeming the time. Going back to Ephesians chapter 5 again, it says, see that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. It's a little encouraging to think that the days are evil. I've noticed it's almost depressing sometimes to get caught up in all the things and all the different scenarios going on and all the news that you can hear, because it seems like things are getting worse. But the truth is that things are as they have been for thousands of years. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to get caught up in these things. We shouldn't allow ourselves to get burdened, tore down for this, because we have a hope in us that's supposed to be driving us and helping build us up and drive us forward. But this challenge to walk in wisdom towards those who are outside kind of reminds me of how a little bit of that challenge of how's your conduct, how's your walk, how are you behaving around others? And when they bring you forth as a wrongdoer, are they brought to shame because they can see the conduct of your good works? And it reminded me of a time I got to go to a courthouse, and I'm kind of odd because I like courthouses, and I've never had to go to one in a negative sense. The last time I got to go to a courthouse, it was to get to witness an adoption, and it's kind of an odd scenario to be there with a happy group of people when you're surrounded by people that are very upset and they don't want to be there. But how fun it is to get to approach a judge knowing in full confidence that there's nothing wrong, that you're there for them to be able to serve you, and rather than you to be held accountable for something. But walking in wisdom also has a testimony aspect to it, because wisdom's in short supply these days. Because there's a lot of people that have kind of smarts and knowledge, but wisdom is something that only comes from God. Wisdom is something that only is from the Spirit. And it's a gift that we have. And it's part of that pursuit, knowing that Jesus is our only source, that we can draw from that and we can help share with others. And where it says in verse 6, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. Because our speech and our wisdom that we offer to people should have a certain flavor to it, should have a certain redeeming quality to it. What I like about salt being given to us as a picture is all the different qualities that it has. And the first thing we think of is a flavoring, but then it's also a preservative, and that's probably its main attribute that it's been used for. But what's fun about salt too is how today it's really cheap. It used to be really precious, and you would think about the idea that a household would be lucky to have a small salt shaker at home, but how easy it is for us to get these big containers, and we have it everywhere. It's in everything, and it's not as valuable as it would have once been. I remember going to a store, and I saw a bag of salt for $5, but another store I went and I bought a bag of sand for $15. So we're seeing sand that has no use is more valuable than something that is actually a precious commodity. And it's only seen that way because it's not so readily available. It hasn't been so massively given to us. And we need to take caution that we don't do that with the Word of God. That we're attentive to the idea of how precious and how vital it is for us, and that we don't neglect it just because it's so readily available, that we don't take it for granted. But how many people are being malnourished in the sense that they're not getting that vital nutrient in their life, that they're not getting that vital ingredient that's only from God, but they don't realize it and they take it for granted. I think about the early church and how precious it was to have just a letter. If they could have one copy of one book from the Bible, how meaningful it was to have it in their language and to be able to read and understand and comprehend on their own and to be able to reason and discern. We could take the Berean challenge today, where we can take everything that people say to us and we can put it through the Bible as a filter to see if it's really true or not. But not very long ago, there were people that all they had was what they could remember, what was ministered to them. And it was even considered illegal in some places to have it in a form that they could understand, to have it in a language that they could understand. But this idea of your speech being seasoned, though, and having grace to it, there should be something about the way we can approach situations. There should be something about the way that we're able to minister to other people that makes us unique. I think about how my coworkers and colleagues at work will come to me and they'll talk about different situations and they'll be kind of stressed out about something, and sometimes they'll all get in this little pity party where they'll all be complaining about something, but to be able to offer a perspective or to be able to offer a solution to something can change the tide or change the perspective of a situation someone is going through. But to be able to offer a healing, I think about how many hurting marriages there are out there that need help from people that are able to offer sound advice, to be able to offer encouragement and uplifting. I have a little sister, and she's not having a hurting marriage, but every time she talks to anybody from our family or anybody from our church, there's nothing but building up going towards them. And there's nothing but prayer and exhortation for them. And every time they speak to us, they feel built up and they feel uplifted. But if they didn't have that, would they be in despair? Would they be just downtrodden or angry with each other because they wouldn't be getting that? But how natural it is for that to happen. How natural is it for negativity to just kind of leach into somebody's life? The idea of salt having the healing property also means that it has this restoring, the ability to purge the bad, the ability to renew, the ability to heal. And when you're speaking and allowing the Spirit of God to speak through you, that's allowing that to happen to others. And it could be the smallest thing that you might not even realize is having a profound effect on somebody. In fact, sometimes it can even be conversation just in general. But where it's also talking about that you may know how you ought to answer each one. When we were talking about vigilance and zeal, and how important it is for us to be consumed in the Word of God. It's also so you're equipped and so you're ready. Things that should come naturally to us that almost seem supernatural to others because the knowledge is already there. It's one of those funny challenges I have with Mark just calling me out of the blue, because I keep wondering if one of these days I'm going to get that 10 minutes before service phone call. Okay, my truck won't start. I hope you're ready to hope you're ready to teach. And it's like, that day might come. But am I ready? Am I prepared? Am I vigilant? Am I seeking? But also with this, the idea of how you ought to answer each one is the challenges that come up. When people challenge you on topics of spirituality, when they ask about God, when they ask about Christ, are you ready to give your testimony to them? Your testimony is the one thing they can argue with, because nobody can look at you, and if you guide them through your life, and this was my before Christ and this is where I am now, they can't tell you you're wrong. They can't deny that. In light of that, though, I have seen people get caught up in something that I would call combative Christianity. And it's the idea that you study somebody else's lifestyle or something, another religion or something, with the sole purpose of defeating them. And if you approach something and just overwhelm them and just try to defeat them and tear them down, you're not having a redeeming quality or a gracious result. Most of the time, you're just going to discourage them and they won't want to be around you anymore, or you might even drive them away. So the idea is, though, are you still studying with a gracious heart? Are you still seeking other people out of love, or are you seeking other people because you want to disprove everything about them and tear them down? And I've seen that too many times to be able to ignore it. But one of the things about this too is also to remember that when you're ministering on God's behalf and when He's using you, you are allowing Him to use you, and that you are not using Him in your perspective. You are not using Him as you would see fit. Because when you would have that type of mindset, you risk the idea of saying, if I were God, I would do it this way. God will equip you with the gifts that you need when you need them. He will give you the gifts that He chooses to give you, and He will guide you in that direction as He sees fit. As a man, there's nothing I can do to... I'm trying to think of how to word this better. I can't force change in somebody's life, and I, as a man, can't redeem them. Only God can do that. And it's only God through me that can do that. And if somebody should hear something from me that should be redeeming, it's Christ through me to them. And when you hear that voice, when you hear that familiarness, it's because you've opened up your heart to be able to accept Him and to be able to bring Him in. For me, as my testimony, that's all I can give to people. I can tell you, this is how God has worked in me, this is what He has done for me, and this is what He can impart to you. Where I talked about that idea of my King returning, that is a truth. There is a day coming where my King is going to return, and the gates to His kingdom are open, and He is currently accepting new residents. And it's just a simple process of understanding who God is and who you are in relation to Him, confessing these things and relying on Him to be the purchaser, to be the renewer of your life, and to hand your life over to Him. The opposite of that is only choosing self. And if you choose self, you deny to have anything involved with God and any of the positive attributes that He would give. And this can sound harsh, because what is the result of that? Well, eternal separation, as we know, is hell. And if anybody's upset by that, it's like, well, that sounds like hate speech to me, because you're only saying there's one way to God. There's only one way to eternal life. A little analogy I came up with about that: knowing salvation and sharing that with someone isn't hateful, because it would be like being in a burning building and knowing where the exit is and not telling anybody and waiting until the smoke was too thick and then only saving yourself. But telling other people that as well. I know the way out, but I'm not going to tell you. That would be hate. Love is when the building catches on fire and you're buying the exit and you're telling people how to get out. You're showing them where the sign is. You're showing them the firemen outside. Come, move this way and get out of the building. That's love. But if you deny that information from them, that's hate. The mystery of God that we're having revealed to us shows us that we need him to be our all. And it also shows us that man has more purpose than just to be an element in God's story, just an element that he can interplay with. He created us solely for the purpose of fellowship and solely to love and be loved by him. And I think it's a waste for us to ignore that. And I think it's a sad thing for anybody to hear that and to feel that they would reject that. Well, I would rather love just myself. And there's so much more to life than that. I've heard a couple people tell me before that they don't want to stop living their life to try to live up to a different standard. I was like, well, the problem is I'm still living my life as well. And I'm also living unto Christ. I'm still pursuing that. And it's like, it hasn't hindered me in any way. It's actually built me up. It's actually edified me even more. So with this in mind, and with this all going forward, we need to be praying for our ministers that a door can be opened so they can do what they ought to be doing as they've been empowered and instructed by God to do. And we need to be praying that the hearts of the people are opened up to be accepting of that. We also need to be making sure that we are full of wisdom, that we are pursuing God, and that our relationship is firm. That plays back on the previous chapter where it talked about being rooted and being strong and being built up in Christ. We need to make sure that we're not being combative, that everything that we do and everything that we share and speak with others is edifying, builds them up, and lifts them up. The last couple verses of this chapter are a little difficult to pull a lot out of, because it seems like an old address. It seems like an old address. Like, we have a couple people who are going to be going to one place to greet you. We have a couple of other people who are going to another place, and they're doing this and that. And it seems like old news. But when you start looking a little bit more at what it is they're doing, and you start seeing the value in what it is they're doing, it starts giving a little bit of a perspective on what we need to be looking around us for. So we're going to dive right into verse 7 here. And we're going to have some fun trying to read some names here. Where it says, Tychius, a beloved brother, faithful minister, and fellow servant in the Lord, will tell you all the news about me. I am sending him to you for this very purpose, that he may know your circumstances and comfort your hearts. With Onesimus, a faithful and beloved brother who is one of you, they will make known to you all the things which are happening here. So we got these two guys, and what is it that they're doing is they are comforting members of the church and also spreading news and gathering news to share with others. My conviction that I got here was, how much do I know about the other ministries in the surrounding areas around me? How much do I know about what's going on in Driggs? How much do I know about what's going on in Idaho Falls, Blackfoot, Pocatello? And do they know what's going on here? Because we're all members of one body. We're all God's people. We're all one church. But are we encouraging each other in that? There's been a lot of times I felt like this area was like the only outpost in southeast Idaho, and that there's nothing else going on. But the more you reach out and the more you get to know, you find out that there are multiple places. But also with these two ministers, their gifting is encouraging others. And it got me kind of thinking a little bit about when I come here on Sundays and Tuesdays and everything to visit with people. Who are those encouragers? Who's that person in the building that just kind of builds you up and edifies you? And how much of a blessing it is to get to talk to them and get to have fellowship with them. And you just feel good afterwards. And it's just kind of a genuine joy to get to visit with these people. I remember seeing RJ, he'd always be at the front door greeting people. And there'd be like a line to go up and talk to them of all these people and all these kids. It's really excited to get to see you. And then after service, where you'll see these little groups of people getting together just to get to share some fellowship. If you ever find yourself getting discouraged, or if you ever find yourself getting overwhelmed, I would encourage you to find that person that has that ability to build you up. I would encourage you to seek out those people that have that natural gifting and that natural urge to edify others and to be able to direct them towards Christ. I think a little bit about the people that are abroad, the people that are a little shut in and kind of isolated right now. And I would encourage them to also reach out. Get on the Facebook and reach out and find those people that can bless you. Find those people that are willing to listen and to share with you. Because also, when we were talking about thankfulness, are we thankful for the news that we hear from others? And how much of a blessing it is when you get to hear from somebody else of how God's moving in their life and how God's working in their lives. And just that natural praise that can come about from that. We know a few things about these people that are mentioned. We don't know all, because they only show up in one or two places in the New Testament, one or two books. Tychius, he's a man who helped Paul, and I think he met up with him on his third journey. Onesimus, he's mentioned in the book of Philemon as well. And there's a request to forgive him if there's anything to be forgiven. Not 100% sure what's happened there, but we do know that he is about the work. He is about ministering to others. And the next person we're going to read about in verse 10 is Aristarchus. My fellow prisoner greets you with Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. And Jesus, who is called Justus, these are my only fellow workers for the kingdom of God, who are of the circumcision, and they have proved to be a comfort to me. Epaphras, who is one of you, a bondservant of Christ, greets you, always laboring for you fervently, for you in prayer, that you may stand perfect and complete in all the will of God. For I bear him witness that he has great zeal for you, and those in Lesothusia, and those in Hierapolis. So that first person, Aristarchus, he's mentioned in Acts, and he's one of the people that is seized by a crowd and kind of imprisoned and kind of persecuted. And so he's kind of a person that tends to be in these hot spots, tends to be in these areas where there's a lot going on. The Mark that was mentioned here, he's somebody that had left Paul. I believe this was on his second trip. He was Barnabas' cousin. There's a little bit of dispute that comes up with him later when they set out, because he shows up to join the group again. And the problem is that some people thought he shouldn't come because they didn't know if he could handle the journey, and some people said that he should go because they said, well, he's here and he's willing and he wants to go. I have the little bit of an ability to see things from both angles here, both perspectives. I understand where Paul was saying that we're going to be in some very difficult places and it might not be easy for him to go. He's already had some trouble before. I can also understand if somebody's eager and wants to serve, you should let them serve. And they kind of end up parting ways. And I think that was good for two reasons, and I think it was good mainly because it spread them, and you ended up having multiple groups ministering in multiple places at the same time. But I think it also gave Paul the ability to not have to be concerned with it. He was able to dive headfirst into any scenario he was going into, and it was able to give Mark and Barnabas the ability to minister where they need to and still serve. Haven't mentioned Luke yet. He's coming up still. Epaphras is fun because I think that he's the one that established the church here in Colossae. But what I like about him is that you always hear action when he's brought up, and you always hear prayer, and just this laborious prayer that he's always talking about. He's on fire for people. He has a heart for people, and he has a heart to pursue. And he has a heart to see people built up and edified and strong, standing firm in Christ. And I like also that he's someone that we only get a few verses talking about him, but it always sums it up with his zeal. It always sums it up with his fire that he has for others. But where it says that his heart's reaching out for those in Lesothusia, he's covering a whole region. It's not just one little area. He's all over the place, and he's always about doing something. I also like how when he gets together with other ministers, he always has news of something that's going on. He always gets to share with them and also gets to encourage them. And in the intro of the book, and a couple other books, you get to see that, how Paul and those with him, it builds up their hearts to hear the ministry is at work. And I think about it, especially in places where they were in prison, to feel like you're kind of trapped, feel like you're kind of stuck and things aren't moving and nothing's working, to hear that the ship's still afloat. Things are still moving forward. It says, Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greet you. It says, greet the brethren who are in Lesothusia and Nymphis and the church that it is in his house. Now when this epistle is read among you, see that it is also read in the church of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. So Luke is noted as somebody that stayed with Paul when the others had left. And Demas is noticed as a fellow worker that might have been part of that group that had to leave Paul in one area. But there's nothing negative said about them here. Everything about them is saying that these are people that are pursuing, these are people that are active. And when it says to greet Nymphis and the church that is in his house, that reminded me of when we were studying through Acts a couple years ago. And you see that all over the place, because it was really common for these churches to be put in somebody's house, especially if it was in a smaller area. And we were having these little challenge questions for each other, like, so if you had to host the church in your house, would you open up your doors to let a little group of people come in? And how much of what I have would I be willing to give over? So I think when people are noted in the Bible saying that they're opening up and they're giving everything they have, I think they're really gifted in giving. I think they're really gifted in fellowship. And where it says also, say to Archippus, take heed to the ministry which you have received in the Lord, that you may fulfill it. Just one of these little random ministers here that I don't know 100% what's going on. I don't know if Paul heard that he's probably lacking a little bit. I don't know if he's heard that he might be having some troubles. But at the same time, I think about what we talked about in verses 4 and 5, where how important is it for us to build up our ministers? How important is it for us to help encourage them? And I think that the idea that normally when a pastor starts getting downtrodden and they start kind of becoming distracted or even discouraged, it might be because they aren't being encouraged, and how often they have to be self-fed, in the sense that they have a lot of opportunity to give to others, but how often do they get the ability to learn on their own? That building up and that prayer that needs to be on this person's behalf, though. In verse 18, it says, this salutation by my own hand, Paul, remember my chains, and grace be with you. Amen. When he puts out that last little piece there where it says, this was written by my own hand, it reminded me how the church had an issue going on where people were starting to argue amongst themselves of who it is that they were following. And you would have some people, it's like, well, I'm of Peter, or I'm of Paul. And they were putting these little divisions in there that shouldn't have been there. And where he's kind of throwing a little note here, he's like, just so you know, this is me, I'm the one that's writing this. And where he mentioned all these different ministers, where I was talking earlier, the idea is, do I know all the different churches around my area? So almost with a sense, if somebody from Driggs asked me where's a church in their local area they could go to, it also convicted me to think, do I know my local ministers? Do I know my ministry team? Do I know the people that I can direct to? Do I know the people that I can help encourage and help build up? We get these little letters from a family every now and then, and I think it's fun because they're always telling us what they're doing, and they're always willing to say what they need. And at first glance, it's a little weird to see this, and it's like, oh, we got some people asking for some money again. But they have a willingness to be able to reach out to the people that they need, and a willingness to say, if you want to serve, here's an opportunity to serve. God can move in the weirdest ways like that, and he could do so much with so little. When I was pondering that, I remembered this time we had a VBS, and we had all these little kids there, and there was it was a natural disaster that happened in a third world country. And we had these little kids, and we presented them with an opportunity to buy chickens. And they would be able to, for like a quarter or 50 cents, they could buy a little baby chicken to send to these people over there. And just how excited these kids got. And it wasn't that it was an expectation of them, but we were finding out that they knew about this. And their hearts were kind of broken. They knew that people were hurting and needed help. And when they were given the opportunity to help and be able to serve, they did. And then we sent these off, and I don't know how these were received, but I do know that it blessed somebody. And I just think it's amazing to think of the idea that God knew that there were going to be these people hurting in some place that needed support, and he knew that there was an 8-year-old in Southeast Idaho that would be willing to buy this person something to bless them, something to show them some love, and how much of an effect that actually really had. So when we're bringing up all these names and we're thinking of all these things, I just think about, are we looking for those that we can serve? Are we looking for those abilities for us to be able to do things for each other? Are we being attentive, and are we being zealous for that? Remembering the chains, though, I just still think about the idea of, are we praying that the ministry of Christ is not being held back? Are we praying that anything that would be in the way is taken out of the way? I think of Psalms, how David would be saying these prayers, and some of them he would just be completely broken before the Lord, just like, Lord, I need you to save me, I need you as my Redeemer. And then he'd have these other Psalms he would write that sounded kind of strange, because it's like, take your enemy and grind them into dust. Take your enemy and destroy them, drive them away. And it almost sounds harsh to be saying, but is that your heart? You know, Lord, don't let anybody delight in their wickedness. Don't let anybody mock you or mock your church or mock your salvation that you're giving to us. Only let your light shine in these places. I've had a lot of fun going through Colossians, and I've had a lot of fun revisiting it. And it's going to be interesting to find a new book. I've had a lot of references that keep pulling me to Ephesians, and part of me almost just wants to jump right into it. But I don't know where I'm going to go from here. But there's a lot of personal evaluation that takes place in a book like this, and there's a lot of encouragement. And the idea is, the most precious thing to me in my life is the fact that I know I'm pursuing what it is God wants for me. I know I'm pursuing the only valuable source. I know that he has me in his hands. And I'm very grateful that he's given me the ability to stand firm there. I love every chance I get to share and every chance I get to teach. And it's funny because I'm not the most, trying to think, I'm not the best in some ways, but I like to think that God's given me the heart to be willing to serve, and to be that's what he needs. He doesn't need the biggest and the smartest. He doesn't need the most elegant speakers. He needs the heart that's willing to serve him, and the heart that's willing to conform. So if anybody's out there and you feel like this is something you need, if you feel like you've heard something that's encouraging, if you feel like you want to look more into this, I would say, first, pray that God will open the doors to your heart. Lord, don't let there be anything in my life that's hindering you from coming to me. And I don't care what any background you have or how you're moving forward to it, but I think if that's your heart and you're asking God to show him to you, he's going to move in that direction. And he's not going to hinder you. I've had the chance to talk to some people before that have said they've been warned about reaching out. Don't explore too much, or you might be led astray. God's not going to lead you astray. If you're earnestly seeking him, he's going to show you his truth. And if it's an earnest prayer for you to say, Lord, tear down any enemy stronghold that's standing firm in my life. I want you to be the rock that I stand on. Make everything else just melt away. And let's move forward from here. That's exactly the first step you need to be taking. And the other thing is to realize that you can take the information and put it through this filter yourself and be able to pursue. Take some time to study a little, read a little, and analyze what it is you're looking at. Get inductive with it. Look up the words. See what they mean. apply it to yourself. Ask the questions. That could be a very difficult thing to do, to self-evaluate like that. And it almost feels like you're tearing yourself down, but you're really examining and you're really putting things together in the place that they need to be. And if there's also somebody out there that needs some help, reach out. Find somebody that can encourage you and find somebody that can build you up. Lord, I just thank you for this evening again. I thank you for this night. And I thank you for this book, Lord, that you've taken us through. Lord, and how grateful I am that you're the one that takes delight in being our all in all, Lord, and that you're the one that wants to fill all things, and that you didn't make some other route to you, or you didn't make it some requirement that I have to fill, Lord. That it's all your grace and it's all your love that's redeeming us. Lord, I just pray for this world, and I just pray for everyone in it, just how overwhelmed we can be, or just how circumstances can seem like they pile up, Lord. I just pray that you tear down every enemy stronghold and make it so only your light shines through this valley, Lord. And I just pray that your word will move out like a flood through the lives of everybody, Lord. And that everyone that's willing to listen will listen, and everybody that can hear can hear. I pray for your ministers, Lord. I pray for those that you've built up to be the ones that are preaching and teaching and leading worship, and just about everything that you would have them be, Lord. I just pray for encouragement for them and strength, uplifting and joy, Lord. And I just pray that they don't ever feel alone, that they feel strong together, Lord. I also pray for all the various churches in these valleys around us, Lord, just might be struggling through this time or might be thriving, Lord. I just pray that they're just joy-filled and moving in your direction. I pray that we're all vigilant, Lord, and that we're all zealous for you, and that we're all looking eagerly for your return, and that we're all found awake when you come back, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you, any of us that are drowsy, that you just drive that away and just make us alert, and make us eager for you, Lord. All right, I just thank you so much for every way that you work in us. I want to hand the remainder of this evening over to you. I just pray these things in your name. Amen.